Carel van Tuyll did his graduate work in art history and classical archaeology at Leiden University. After 5 years on the academic staff of the Netherlands Art History Institute in Florence, he joined the curatorial staff of the Tyler Museum in Haarlem, where in 1989 he became the chief curator. His catalog of the Italian drawings of the 15th and 16th centuries of the Tyler's Museum was published in 2000. During the spring semester of 2004, Carel held the Edmund J. Safra Professorship at CASVA, and later that same year, he was appointed director of the Département d'Art Graphiques at the Musée du Louvre in Paris, where he served until his retirement in 2013. Carel van Tuyll has published widely on Italian art of the 16th and 17th centuries and has co-curated monographic exhibitions on the drawings of Guercino, Annibale Carracci, Rembrandt, and Claude Lorrain. This morning, he will speak to us about Queen Christina of Sweden's collection of drawings. Please welcome Carel van Tuyll.
Should be about right here. Can you hear me this way? Or needs to be? Good. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this splendid occasion, not only for the hard work they did in bringing us all together, but also for so beautifully making sure that the succession of talks complements one another in such a nice way. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. My subject today, I was supposed to have number 1, and I only see number 2. Is that? Thank you. My subject today is a famous, almost legendary person, Christina of Sweden, daughter of Gustav Adolf Vasa, the most successful military commander on the Protestant side during the 30 Years' War. His death on the battlefield in 1632 made his daughter queen at a tender age of 6. She assumed the reins of government herself at 18 in 1644. Highly intelligent, unconventional, and insatiably curious, the young queen soon established a reputation as the Minerva of the North, corresponding with princes and philosophers all over Europe, and inviting a stream of scholars and artists to come to her court in Stockholm. Most famously, of course, René Descartes. And then, in 1654, she shocked her country and the world by abdicating. After 10 years on the throne, she left Sweden and converted to Roman Catholicism. 2 years later, she arrived in Rome to make it her home for the rest of her life. There, she constructed for herself a new identity as a sovereign without dominion, the second most prominent person in the papal city, an active and influential participant in political and intellectual debates, a tireless promoter of musical and theatrical events, and a prominent collector. Contemporary sources speak very highly of Christina's taste, use superlatives to describe her collection. From Sweden, she had brought many paintings, tapestries, bronzes, sculptures, and drawings to Rome, some of them the fruit of the successful siege of Prague by the Swedish troops in 1648. Others, her own acquisitions. The Queen rented a palace on the Lungara, the Palazzo Riario, which she enlarged and redecorated so that it became a true royal residence, filled with accumulated treasures and a renowned library. And part of that library were the albums of drawings. And it's, of course, these drawings that concern us today. Their number and quality were evidently impressive. The young Swedish architect Nicodemus Tessin, who visited Rome in 1687-88, wrote home to say that, quote, "The best drawings I have seen here were those of Her Majesty the Queen." That she took a personal interest in the drawings and was considered an expert in this field appears from a letter alluded to by Michiel just now, a letter from the painter Bonaventura Bisi, who wrote in 1655 to his patron Leopoldo de' Medici. He had met Christina in Bologna and states that the Queen understands drawings better than her painter, that is, David Beck, author of this portrait of his patron. In the 18th century, as you shall see, a provenance from Christina's collection was still considered a guarantee of quality. And even today, the Queen's drawings are considered somehow special. Witness the fact that I'm standing here. Indeed, Christina's larger-than-life personality has continued to appeal to the imagination. Even if, for much of the 20th century, her image was perhaps usurped or used by another talented Swedish lady, Greta Garbo, in a wonderful film of 1933. Serious research into the Queen's collection and her patronage didn't start until 1966, the year the Council of Europe devoted a vast exhibition in Stockholm to Christina's presence on the European scene. In that year, Jon Quirijn van Rechter en Altena, a name now familiar to all drawings collectors, published a short monograph investigating the provenance of the large group of Italian drawings that the Taylor Museum in Haarlem had acquired in the late 18th century from the Roman Oescalchi family. Did these drawings indeed form the cabinet of Queen Christina of Sweden, as the bill of sale had claimed in 1790? Altena's research, plus subsequently discovered archival documents, have confirmed that claim for part of the collection of Italian drawings at least. The current state of research into Christina's drawings, in fact, allows two seemingly contradictory statements. One, the Queen's collection of old master drawings, that is, those by mainly Italian artists of the 15th and 16th centuries, is remarkably well documented. And what is more, an important segment of it survives to this day in Haarlem. Yet, it appears that she personally had little to do with constituting this collection. Second, Christina's activity as a collector of modern drawings, that is, by 17th century artists, is almost entirely unknown. The size scope of her holdings in that area can only be guessed at, and her tastes and preferences are a mystery. It is best, perhaps, to discuss these two aspects, the old masters and the moderns, separately before considering what the discrepancy between the two might mean and what it says about the Queen's agency in constituting her own collection. Christina's old masters need not detain us long. The story, how she came to acquire them and what became of them afterwards, has often been told. In 1651, that is to say, well before her abdication, the Queen had acquired several albums, we don't know exactly how many, albums full of drawings from her chargé d'affaires in The Hague, the textile merchant Peter Spiering van Zilverkroon, a member of the well-known family of tapestry producers from Delft. The items are described in 1653 as, I quote, the rarest and most precious selected objects, including a book of drawings by Raffaello Urbino, a similar by Titian, another by Michelangelo, one by Polidoro, one by Giulio Romano, as well as more books, with others by the foremost masters of Italy and Europe. It is likely, though it cannot be proven, that Spiering himself had bought these books of drawings, or many of them, a few years earlier, in 1645, from the painter Joachim von Sandrart, when the latter left Amsterdam. In his autobiography, Sandrart refers to this sale. Sandrart had, of course, had ample opportunity to acquire Italian drawings during his years in Rome, before coming north in 1637, but he may also have bought some in the Netherlands. Michelangelo, Raphael, Titian, Giulio, Polidoro, these same names keep cropping up whenever Christina's old master drawings are mentioned by her contemporaries, with the addition in one place of the names of Parmigianino for prints and Holtzius for drawings. But we don't know how many albums exactly she owned by these artists. In 1687, Tessin, the young architect, says that he was allowed to see 7 books of drawings in the library of the Queen's Palace. And he mentions a few individual sheets by Michelangelo, Raphael, and Giulio. the well-known connoisseur and dealer Padre Sebastiano Resta evokes the same names in his notes on sheets that he'd seen in Christina's albums. Interestingly, he says at one point that the Queen had very few ancient drawings, meaning 400 sheets. And this is confirmed by that part of the collection that is now in Haarlem, which is indeed relatively poor in early Italian drawings. The scope of the range of Christina's collection of 500 drawings is thus fairly well indicated by the sources. We even possess manuscript inventories of 4 of her albums, those containing drawings by Raphael, Goltzius, and 2 miscellaneous Italian sheets. And there's every reason to believe that these are the same albums that she'd acquired from Spiering in 1951. Among the works listed in the inventories, which appear to have been drawn up very shortly after the Queen's death, are dozens of sheets that can now be found in Haarlem in the Taylor collection. Michelangelo, Raphael, Giulio Romano, Polidoro da Caravaggio, Titian, although actually Domenico Campagnola, but in the 17th century this was pretty much the same, and of course Goltzius. Well, the rarity of Titian drawings has always been established, and any number of drawings by Campagnola went under the name of Titian. With the exception of the Michelangelo and the tiny Polidoro, the sheets on the screen now are among the many in Haarlem that can be identified in Christina's inventories. Some of her albums contain drawings given to a single master, Raphael, Goltzius, etc., but without being overly rigorous or exclusive about it. The first item in the Raphael book, according to the inventory, was a now lost head of an old man with the inscription P. Perugino F. Fecit. The 2 miscellaneous albums, entitled Disegni di vari pittori italiani, show little strictness in their internal organization, with sacred and profane images cheek by jowl, and sheets given to Michelangelo and Bandinelli, followed immediately by others by Primaticcio, Arpino, and the Carracci. Some attempt does seem to have been made to keep works from a particular school together. For instance, in the first book, we find sheets given to Titian, Campagnola, Veronese, Pordenone, but then other Venetians, Palmagiovan and Tintoretto, appear in the second book. Even so, not enough drawings from these albums have been identified to allow us to draw any significant conclusions about their organization. Even if only a fraction of them are identified today, for the inventories list dozens of sheets now lost, a large enough part of Christina's old masters survive in Haarlem to confirm the high esteem in which her collection of drawings was traditionally held. But, as I pointed out earlier, most of these drawings were acquired by her en bloc with the Spiering albums, and not chosen personally according to her own taste. Thus, there are few Florentine 16th century drawings other than Michelangelo. No Pontormo, no Rosso, or very little Vasari. It's really Michelangelo and nothing much else. That is just a reflection of what was available on the market to Sandrart in the 1630s or to Spiering in The Hague, but says nothing about Christina's choices. To what extent the Queen added 16th century drawings once she settled in Rome is unfortunately unknown, as is the answer to the question we must consider next. What 17th century drawings did Christina own? And here we face an almost complete lack of documentation. There's no inventories to help us, no collector's mark, no descriptions in the sources. Christina did continue to add to the collection. That is, for instance, there is the report about which Michiel spoke just now, that she helped herself, precisely how is not certain, to some of the choice drawings that her court artist David Beck had assembled while in her service. She bought the Genoese collection of the Imperiali family in 1660s, paintings, but there seems to have been one album of drawings accompanying them. And in 1670, her accounts show her buying another album of drawings from a certain Bartolomeo Pazzi. We know nothing of its contents. And finally, 1685, The Spanish ambassador, Marqués del Carpio, gave her a drawing from his own extensive collection. Ecco tutto. This is all we know about Christina's collecting activity in Rome. This paucity of documentation has led some scholars to question whether Christina possessed any modern drawings at all. Others hold the opposite view. They say that the Queen of Sweden, who, according to all the biographies and stories and anecdotes, had excellent friendly relations with artists like Bernini, Pietro da Cortona, and all the prominent painters and sculptors in Rome, must have collected their drawings because she couldn't buy their paintings. She didn't have enough money for big-scale patronage and therefore must have collected their drawings. And they point to two important groups of 17th century drawings by these masters, presently in Leipzig in the Museum für Bildende Künste and in Haarlem, two groups of drawings that have traditionally been believed to come from Christina. And as we've seen, that provenance has been corroborated for at least the Renaissance drawings for those in Haarlem. At this point, it is necessary to delve briefly into the very complex afterlife of the royal collection. After her death on the 19th of April 1689, the Queen was found to have bequeathed the bulk of her estate to her good friend and confidant and father confessor, Cardinal Decio Azzolino, who had been, as it were, her prime minister since her arrival in Rome 30-odd years earlier. The good cardinal did not, however, get to enjoy Christina's inheritance for any length of time. He himself died less than 2 months later, on the 8th of June, 1689. And thus, it was his cousin, Marchese Pompeo Azzolino from Fermo in the Marches, who became heir to the vast estate left by the Queen of Sweden. Consider his position. Here was a deeply provincial nobleman, suddenly saddled with a royal legacy of European size and splendor, a legacy which, aside from the treasures in the Palazzo Riario, was comprised of the Swedish crown jewels, pawned in Amsterdam. Large estates in the south of Sweden and northern Germany that the Swedish government had long been trying to get its hands on. All the sundry complications pertaining to a royal household, and huge outstanding debts. No question then that Azzolino had to divest himself of as much of this as possible in short order. Tommaso Montanari has written eloquently and entertainingly about the delicate negotiations that Azzolino entered into with princes and monarchs all over Europe. Both the Elector of Brandenburg and William III of Orange at one point expressed interest, although Louis XIV politely declined. But buyers were finally found in Rome itself. Christina's library was ceded to Cardinal Ottoboni, soon to be Pope, and Prince Livio Oescalchi. Oh, I'm sorry, this is funny. I thought, no, I'm going too far. I thought I had this image, but we'll see later. Livio Oescalchi, the wealthy nephew of a previous pope, agreed to pay the sum of 123,000 scudi for the remaining contents of Palazzo Riario. This was in 1692, 3 years after Christina's death. The bill of sale specifies the statues, ancient and modern, the pictures, tapestries, bronzes, medals, coins that were part of the deal. However, it specifically excludes the drawings, stating that, quote, drawings are not part of the sale but are added as a gift, end quote. And furthermore, it says, no claims are to be based on the fact that certain sheets may perhaps be missing. Presumably, the inventories went along with the collection. This must mean, as Montanari has deduced, that Azzolino had already sold or given away a number of drawings, perhaps whole albums full of them. We simply don't know. And indeed, a number of important sheets in other collections, other than Haarlem or Leipzig, can be traced to Christina's albums. Sheets that were never part of the Oescalchi collection. And this one by Raphael, now in the Kunstmuseum in Düsseldorf, is punctually described, recto and verso, in the inventory of Christina's book of Raphael drawings. And in 1702, the Roman diarist Francesco Valesio writes about several bellissimi disegni by Raphael that Azzolino still had from the Queen's collection. One of them, oops, that's a tricky thing. One of them may have been this famous sheet now in the Royal Library at Windsor, fully described by Nicodemus Tessin, who saw it in 1687 in Christina's album. Queen's collection of master drawings therefore did not reach Livio Oescalchi intact in 1692. This means that it is certainly possible that drawings formerly belonging to the Queen of Sweden were among the miscellaneous objects, bronzes, antiquities, books that the dealer Francesco Renzi sold in 1714 to the city of Leipzig, where they remain to this day. In the 18th century, they were reported to have come from Christina. The material in Leipzig is a very mixed bunch, with many late 17th century drawings of mostly antiquarian interest, copies after medals, after objects found in the catacombs, portraits of famous men, designs for ornament, as well as outright copies after Raphael de Carracci Domenichino. However, the Leipzig albums also contain important series, which should come on screen now, yes, with sketches and studies by Salvatore Rosa and by Bernini, two artists Christina is known to have admired very much. Could the Leipzig albums have been formed by the Queen? The evidence is circumstantial, inconclusive, and frankly too complex to go into here. Suffice it to say that it is not to be excluded, but perhaps not very likely, that part of Christina's drawings ended up in Leipzig. The bulk of her collection, though, went to Livio Oescalchi. And there we encounter a second complicating factor. For Oescalchi, as Bert Meyer was the first to show, was himself an avid collector who added many thousands of sheets to those he bought from Christina's estate. And their collections now have become almost impossible to separate. At best, one can try to separate the 600 drawings that Oescalchi is certain to have acquired independent of Christina's inheritance. There are sheets in Haarlem that, oh, there is this portrait, I'm sorry. Anyway, here you see Livio Oescalchi in an engraving with a frame drawn by Maratti, and he is the artist that I want to get to, because in 1691, before he buys the estate of Christina, the account books show that Livio Oescalchi bought an album with 28 drawings by Carlo Maratti from a certain Antonio Politi. Many of the more than 20 Maratti drawings now in Haarlem may stem from this purchase. And this sketch by Maratti's pupil, Giuseppe Passeri, can be dated very precisely to 1690, that is the year after the Queen's death. In that year, Passeri accompanied Padre Resta on a trip through northern Italy, copying in red chalk the paintings that they had admired in cities they visited. Here, he reproduces a painting you have recognized immediately, which was then in a church in Correggio's hometown. It was Resta who added the inscription at lower right. The sheet stems from an album that Livio Oescalchi acquired from Resta in 1710. It was entitled The Anfiteatro Pittorico. From the same, now dismembered volume, must come numerous other drawings in Haarlem that carry Resta's unmistakable annotations, such as this sketch by Algardi for a stucco relief of about 1645. We know Resta owned this one because it remained on part of its old page of the album, with Resta's annotation, Domenichino Sant'Andrea, on the verso, an annotation which allows us in turn to propose Resta provenance likewise for this sheet by Domenichino, which is a study precisely for the fresco in Sant'Andrea della Valle. A strong case can be made also that it is to Oescalchi that we owe the more than 300 landscape drawings by Italian artists in Haarlem, including large groups by Gianfrancesco Grimaldi and Crescenzio Onofri. Both artists were admittedly linked with Christina. Grimaldi designed a frontispiece with the royal arms and was involved in numerous theatrical performances that the Queen attended, while Onofri frescoed a room in her palace. and in theory she could therefore have collected their drawings. But the inventory of the Queen's paintings, her picture gallery is fully inventoried and well known, that inventory doesn't indicate any particular fondness for landscape as a genre, whereas Livio Oescalchi was passionate about landscape, owning numerous canvases by practitioners of the genre such as Rosa, Mola, or Onofre Duguay, well before he bought Christina's inheritance. It seems far more likely that it was he, rather than the Queen, who acquired the landscape drawings now in Haarlem, including the splendid series of over 80 studies by the greatest of them all, Claude Lorrain. And finally, we've recently been able to identify an admittedly modest portrait drawing that nonetheless has some historical significance. It portrays Livio Oescalchi himself, as comparison with the undated engraving by Benoît Farjat, made of the same sitter shows, and with Monet's sculptured relief of 1695 in the Louvre. Subject and chronology thus tie this unassuming portrait drawing clearly to Livio Oescalchi and not Christina. In the absence, therefore, of positive proof that any of the 17th century drawings, 17th century Italian drawings now in Haarlem, of which a sample is on the screen now, ever belonged to Queen Christina, and faced with at best circumstantial evidence that the Leipzig albums stemmed from her collection, we must conclude en mineur that her role as a collector of modern drawings remains as yet impossible to define. The attempt to pinpoint Christina's supposed collection of modern drawings raises a larger issue, namely the changes that seem to have gradually occurred in the collecting activities of Roman elite during her lifetime. The question to what extent drawings by living artists, although those recently deceased, were available on the Roman market in the later 17th century, has not really been addressed fully yet. And were they considered as desirable, as collectible as sheets by established Renaissance masters? Would an elite collector, a cardinal or a prince or even the Queen, have considered studies by their contemporaries worth adding to their holdings? When the thousands of drawings, another selection. When the thousands of drawings left by Domenichino, his own studies and cartoons, plus hundreds of those by his revered teacher Annibale Carracci, came on the market in Rome in the 1660s, it was two artists, Pier Francesco Mola and Carlo Maratti, who acquired the most of them. Not any prince or cardinal, let alone Queen Christina. And the same with the Angeloni drawings by Carracci that Pierre Mignard took to France. All but the most dedicated princely collectors, it seems, tended to buy their drawings in albums, put together for them by eruditi such as Filippo Baldinucci, Prior Renzi, Sebastiano Resta, the most famous of them. Resta's albums, insofar as they survive, may be indicative. One, for instance, the one that is still intact in Milan, which he sent to Milan in 1706, the Galleria Portatile in the Ambrosiana, attempts to present a complete panorama of the evolution of Italian drawing, a very Vasarian or Gaddi-esque idea from Cimabue to the present day. But the part reserved for the present day tends to be quite small. Out of 250 sheets in the Milan Codex, only about 10 are by late 17th century artists, and those mainly by artists that Resta knew intimately, namely Maratti, again, and Passeri. Yet things were clearly changing during Christina's lifetime. Witness the fact that Livio Oescalchi, as I mentioned earlier, in 1691 bought an album full of Maratti drawings precisely, and when the artist was still very much alive and kicking. These changing patterns need further investigation. One way in which someone like Christina of Sweden might obtain drawings by living artists would be to commission them. Her contemporary, the Spanish ambassador Del Carpio, did exactly that, but only occasionally for frontispieces for his albums. Another way would, of course, be to obtain drawings as gifts, and here we are on firmer ground. It is well known, thanks to the diary that Chanteloup kept during Bernini's stay in Paris in 1665, that the great master of the Roman Baroque regularly gave the Queen drawings by his hand. One day, Bernini showed Chanteloup a drawing of a Saint Jerome, most likely this one now in the Louvre, that he had made the previous evening. in order to present it to Prime Minister Colbert. And Chanteloup quotes Bernini saying that each year in Rome he made 3 drawings like this, one for the Pope, one for the Queen of Sweden, and a third for Cardinal Chigi, and he presented them to them on the same day. But frustratingly, what became of the drawings Bernini gave to Christina? They are not in Haarlem. There's one important autograph Bernini there, this design for the Blood of Christ, a late work by Bernini that belonged to Cardinal Azzolino. It's mentioned in his inventory. Nor do I believe it possible to identify Christina's missing Bernini presentation drawings among the studies and sketches now in Leipzig. It seems hard to imagine that the most famous artist of the day would present a royal person with mere sketches and rough drafts, however much we may admire their power and vigor today. These are not the sorts of drawings artists showed their patrons in the 17th century. The Leipzig material, with many workshop drawings, surely comes from an album put together after Bernini's death. And the same goes for the numerous drawings by by Guercino, now in Haarlem. We know Christina met the aging master when she stopped in Bologna on her way to Rome in 1655. Malvasia says that she wanted to touch the hand that had wrought masterpieces. But it is impossible to believe that the small fragments and sketches and counterproofs among the more extensive Guercinesque material in Haarlem could ever have been thought worthy of a queen. Had Guercino wanted to give her a sample of his art, he would surely have produced something like this extraordinary sheet in colored chalks, but this masterpiece is in the Morgan, not at Haarlem. To conclude, there is no doubt that Christina of Sweden owned an impressive and even spectacular collection of 16th century drawings, including masterpieces by many of the great Renaissance masters from Michelangelo to Goltzius. She acquired the majority of these at the start of her reign in 1651 from Peter Spearing. And we do not know to what extent the contents of those albums corresponded to her personal choices or taste. She certainly seems to have been knowledgeable about drawings and may well have taken a personal interest in the collection. But it remains uncertain whether she actively added drawings by Italian artists of her own day once she settled in the Papal City. We must hope that a fortunate archival discovery will one day shed new light on this matter, and at the same time continue to investigate and analyze patterns of collecting in 17th century Italy in the hope of learning more about this legendary queen's personal taste and choices. Thank you.